During the Second World War, food didn't disappear slowly. In many places, it vanished almost overnight. Trains stopped running, markets emptied. Ration cards became meaningless when shelves were bare. For millions of families across Europe and parts of Asia, survival no longer depended on money, connections, or luck. It depended on whether you could pull food out of the ground with your own hands, quietly, efficiently, and without attracting attention. What most people don't realize is that families didn't just grow gardens. They adapted farming itself. They broke rules that had existed for generations. They used land no one thought could grow anything. They learned which crops could survive neglect, cold and poor soil, and which farming habits wasted calories instead of producing them. These weren't idealistic victory gardens. These were desperate, intelligent systems built under occupation, bombing and starvation. Today, when supply chains stretch across continents and grocery stores hide how fragile food access really is, these forgotten WWII farming tricks matter again. Not as nostalgia, but as hard-earned lessons. Let's get into the methods that fed families when stores no longer existed. How families abandoned traditional rows to defeat hunger. One of the first changes wartime families made was abandoning neat row planting. Rows waste space, expose soil to wind, and demand constant maintenance. Instead, families shifted to dense, irregular planting, where crops shaded each other and locked moisture into the soil. Potatoes were planted closer together than agricultural manuals recommended. Beans were allowed to climb anything available. Greens filled gaps wherever sunlight touched earth. Today, this translates directly into intensive gardening. Whether it's in a backyard or just a small plot, abandoning perfect spacing in favour of living ground cover, well, it increases yield without increasing labour. Why calorie per square foot became the only metric that mattered. During the Second World War, farmers stopped caring about variety and started caring about survival math. Crops were chosen based on how many calories they produced per square foot and how long they could stay in the ground without harvesting. Potatoes, turnips, beets and cabbages dominated because they stored energy efficiently and honestly tolerated neglect. Modern gardeners can apply this by prioritizing calorie-dense staples over novelty crops. You know, a single bed of potatoes feeds a household far longer than the same space planted with lettuce. You know, families grew food in places soldiers never looked. Open fields, well, they drew attention, but hidden food survived. Folks planted crops along hedgerows, behind sheds, between buildings, and even inside bomb craters where the soil had been churned loose. Fruit trees were espaliered flat against walls, so they avoided detection while soaking up the warmth those walls held on to. In modern terms, I suppose you call this stealth gardening. Urban backyards, fence lines and side yards often provide overlooked growing space that doesn't really advertise food production. Why saving seed quietly meant surviving the next year. Seed saving became a matter of life and death, truly. Families would select the strongest plants and quietly save seed, even when laws forbade it. Over time, they developed hyperlocal crops, perfectly adapted to their own soil and climate. So today, saving seed from your best plants really builds resilience against supply shortages and rising costs, while, improving yields year after year. How composting replaced fertilizer when nothing could be bought. Chemical fertilizer was just unavailable. Families composted everything honestly. Vegetable scraps, ashes, paper and animal manure were all layered carefully. Even human waste was composted, using strict separation and aging methods out in rural areas. Modern composting restores soil fertility without dependence on purchased inputs, which is especially valuable during economic instability. Animals were, integrated into daily life in such a way that they were neither seen nor heard. Chickens, rabbits and goats were kept small, quiet and always hidden from view. During inspections, animals were housed indoors and fed scraps instead of precious grain. Absolutely nothing was wasted. Bones were simmered into broth, while fat was carefully rendered and reused again and again. Even today, small-scale livestock, when managed discreetly and responsibly, is still considered one of the most efficient ways to produce protein. It's a system that, has truly stood the test of time. Now, families staggered their planting to avoid losing everything at once. Rather than planting all at one go, they sowed in waves. If one planting was lost to frost, pests, or even discovery, the others could still survive. This approach reduced risk, you see, rather than simply trying to maximize speed. Staggered planting still protects modern growers from weather volatility and, crop failure. Soil was protected instead of exhausted. Tilling was minimized since it exposed soil to erosion and drying. Mulch from leaves, straw and even shredded paper was used to cover the beds. This helped preserve moisture and, suppressed weeds. Modern no-dig gardening mirrors these wartime techniques almost exactly, which I have to say really proves their long-term effectiveness. So, why did root cellars end up replacing pantries? Well, food wasn't always harvested all at once, you see. Folks would leave crops in the ground as long as possible, sort of turning their gardens into a kind of living storage. Root cellars then kept produce edible for months on end, all without the need for electricity. These days, learning even just basic food storage can really, dramatically extend your harvests and cut down on how much you rely on refrigeration. Families figured out how to grow food through winter, not just in the summer months. With cold frames, cloches, and whatever coverings they could improvise, they managed to stretch their growing seasons. And even in the depths of winter, hardy greens could be harvested from beneath the snow. Season extension remains one of the most powerful tools for modern food independence. Why community knowledge, really mattered more than individual effort. Farming knowledge sort of spread quietly among trusted neighbours. One family specialised in one crop, another in seed saving, and yet another in storage. Modern communities, honestly, can regain resilience by sharing skills instead of isolating efforts. So, what do these forgotten farming tricks still teach us today? 32 families didn't survive because they had more, not at all. They survived because they adapted faster than the systems collapsing around them. These farming tricks weren't just clever hacks. They were disciplined responses to reality. If you value this kind of knowledge, do consider subscribing to the channel, share this video with someone who respects practical history, and help keep these lessons alive before they're forgotten again.